Well, it's pretty wet, but you've got to start the day with some of the tougher jobs, I always think, when you've got plenty of energy. So I'm continuing to put this homemade compost into the first bin, which is all my green waste goes in there. Right, well, it was interesting to receive the Real Seeds notification that their catalogue is ready to order from. So I got straight onto that, because last year I found that, well, a few of the seeds that are a little more unusual were difficult to get hold of, and they went out of stock quite quickly. So if you're looking for Real Seeds then get online straight away and make the most of the seed supply that they've got, which is some interesting stuff, I have to say, and usually something a bit unusual. Well, I ordered a new tomato that I've never grown before, because I'm going to grow quite differently in the polytunnel in the coming season. I'll get onto that a few videos down the line, and I'll tell you what seeds I'm going to grow later as well. But I did order House, the small tomato with all the cherry size fruit on, which I always found to be fantastic. And I have saved some seed, but I've bought some seed as well, because you only get about 10 in a packet. So yeah, it's worth making sure you got all the bases covered on a vegetable that you really like. Well, talking about vegetables that I really like, many of you who watch my channel regularly will know that I'm a big fan of celeriac. And I like celeriac because of the taste. It's got a really unusual taste, and it mixes quite well with mashed potato to make a sort of celeriac mash, and it's also really good in soups. So I grew celeriac this year, and I grew it in 3 places. And what I'm going to do today is show you what it looks like now. And I think the growing season is pretty much over for celeriac. It won't change shape much now. And the question is it worth growing? And I've got to be honest, I'm dealing with a bit of protest from Mrs. K, who says that when I get the celeriac back home, and it is always a small amount because of the nature of the vegetable, it can be inundated with those small worms, at least here. So we're going to have a look at that carefully. Let's go. Thanks to everybody who gave me suggestions about how to further enhance this barrier that I've built, and the general consensus was put some more posts in, and I probably will do that to make it absolutely secure. Well, these are the other celeriac that I've got, and there's actually almost no root on them at all. We'll take them out and I'll show you them, but these went in that much later. They were a bit of an afterthought, just filling space where I was taking things out that had not succeeded, and I had a couple of plants left over, so I stuck them in. So I think one thing that you do learn from growing celeriac is the earlier you can get a reasonably healthy plant in to the ground, the better off you are, because the longer growing season certainly plays into a larger root at the end of the day. So that's something to think about if you're growing celeriac. Right, I think I'll take the nets down and we'll have a good look at these. So what I'm going to try and do to help Mrs. K overcome the worm problem is actually, well, prepare the vegetables over here today. So I've bought myself a good kitchen knife over, and I'm going to cut into these and really give you a good idea of what gets cut away and what you can keep. So that's that one down. And then, of course, taking these out at this time of year will enable me to get on and cover these beds ready for the next growing season, which means moving some of my compost over and spreading it across the top of the bed. Right, one more. Okay, here we go. Right, let's get in close and I can show you what this looks like at soil level and compared to this one over here. Right, let's get in and take some of these leaves away and you can see what this vegetable looks like. Got my barrow next to me, which is handy. Okay, so there isn't an awful lot under soil level that's going to remain edible. So that's the sort of size of root that I've managed to grow up here. And well, we're going to pull this one and just look at what the roots look like. And you can see it's a very strong and substantial root structure. And already you can see that it's very attractive to the worms. That sort of interlaced roots. We've got in here just oodles of worms, smaller ones, the red ones, and the larger ones. So you can see why it does attract them. Right, well, we're going to take that one to one side and sort of prepare it and have a look at what it's got to offer. So I'll take the tops off and we'll leave that one there for a minute and go and have a look at that larger one. Oops. Right, same treatment. Let's take these leaves off. And you can already see it's a very much more substantial root, although it's got a huge chunk out of the side of it. Let's get it out. Same thing, a good strong root growth. You can see there the big chunk out the side, and that's invariably where it's been eaten into over time by slugs. And there's also some small holes in it. It'd be interesting when we cut this one up to see what we're playing with. Right, let's get those over to a bit of board and we'll see if we can prepare them. Okay, well, we'll deal with this smaller one first. And probably the first step, which I'll go away and do, is just to wash all of this dirt out, because all these roots, they really sort of trap the soil that they grow into. So we've got a lot of soil in there, so we'll go and give them both a wash. Right, well, that certainly makes things clearer. Much easier to see what I'm cutting into. Okay, so I'll take that first slice of root off and you get an idea of how the root structure grows. This is the main root and then all these periphery roots that are growing off it. And because the soil is sort of bound into those, you need to cut those clear. Okay, there we go. Just take the edges off as well. And I'm quite surprised how good that is. And what we'll do now is we'll cut the top off, because you can't cook this really. So taking some slanting cuts down just to remove the root growth, or the leaf growth I should say. And that's pretty much what you got left. And I notice I've got a bit of a hole here. Otherwise that one's okay. Let's take that hole off. And you can see how it does penetrate down into the root. So you end up, where those holes exist, you do end up cutting bits off, and eventually you give up and have to take the middle out. And here we go. This is very interesting. If I cut through this where this hole exists, you can see how far that goes into the actual root, and if you just kept chopping, you chop quite a lot off and something's burrowed down in there. So I'm just going to cut that out with a V, get rid of that, and cut that one out with a V and get rid of that. Okay, so I think, you know, barring peeling, which I'll do with my gloves off so I don't get it incredibly dirty, that's about what you get out of one of those smaller celeriac. And I suppose that's enough for, you know, a meal, maybe when you've peeled it, just short of what you need. Right, let's put that one to one side and have a go at this bigger one and just see how that ends up. Right, first cut. So there we are. Root looks fairly similar, lots to cut away, and with this bigger one there's an awful lot to cut away at the sides, so I'm just going to take that opportunity now and show you that it's actually slugs in there, and that's what gets into it and causes you to lose so much of it. And I do suffer from slugs quite a lot. There we are, another slice off of it, still slugs in it. And let's cut the outside roots off. Move that to one side. There's more to come off here. And that chunk there. And let's take the top off. Okay, so we're getting down to a fairly small piece of root now, and we've still got quite a lot to cut away. There we go. And now I'm going to try and gouge out this bit with the slugs. Otherwise we'll just keep cutting. Right, there we are. I think that's what we got left as edible, and you can see that actually there's not an awful lot in it, but the reality is this one was munched away more than these. So we've still got a hole here. Let me just get rid of that. Yep, that went with no problem at all, and we've still got more holes on the outside here, so let's just cut those off. Yep, they've gone. So there we are. 2 celeriac produce that sort of amount of edible food. Right, I'll stick that in my sieve. This will all go into my compost bin, which is right behind me. Fantastic. And I think what I'll do now is just pull more, because I want to clear those beds, and as I say, we can freeze this, so I'm going to have a bit of a chopping and cleaning session. Okay, well, that was very revealing. I think you can probably see for yourself. There's 2 that were not significantly infested, and that was one of the bigger ones. You can see how it's just been eaten away inside. It's made that celeriac totally useless. And, you know, of those smaller ones, almost all of them totally useless. I think this one's going to be salvageable, although I've not finished chopping it up and there's some holes there. And you have to ask yourself, is all that growing time and effort worth it for what, probably 3 or 4 successful celeriac? And I don't know whether that's a product of no dig and the really rich compost that I'm creating and using across the bed. I mean, it's fantastic to have great worm content inside your compost, but you can see that the slugs and the worms absolutely devastating this. And it's probably the slugs that are boring the hole and that the worms are then following in, I would imagine, but really is a devastated crop. So the big question is, will I bother to grow celeriac next year based on that experience? Well, I'm going to give it a lot of thought. I think where my head's at is, can I grow them in a different substrate, something that isn't so full of slug and worms, and I don't know the answer to that. Maybe I have to prepare a bed differently. I'll give that a bit of research. If you know the best way to approach this, then put it in the comments below, because I'd be very interested. I've learned a number of things with celeriac over the years. Grow them large, because it just isn't worth chopping through all that top of the vegetable and root of the vegetable to expose a very small middle that you can then cook. So I've always grown them, well, in recent years, wide apart, no more than sort of 8 plants. Maybe they need to be 6 plants, I don't know. But I think first and foremost here, I need to get the substrate worked out properly so that when I have grown a decent sized celeriac, it leaves me enough to cook. It's a game, isn't it? It's a learning and journey that we all take on vegetables, and I guess it's different for everybody in each of their growing conditions. Oh well, these are the challenges we have, and I've got to say, regardless of how much I lost, I still enjoyed it. So there's these 3 left, and for completeness, I think I probably ought to say that the leaves of these have got a big following, because they add a lot of flavour to things. They're very sort of celery tasting leaf, and I think with these I'm just going to leave them in and use the leaves in any stews that we make. There's plenty there for us. We don't use a lot of the leaves, but I know that there is a big following for adding them to various meals. So that's one thing that you can consider. It does give you a separate crop that you can use in a different way by using the leaves. Well, that's it on celeriac. Moving on. I tell you what, it's very claggy down here, and this is my 6th barrow load. I said I wasn't going to do this in big chunks, but I'm very conscious of getting out of this area now. There's quite a lot of work to do shifting, so I'm going to just do a bit of a concerted effort. Right, so I'm out of the first one. I'm pretty much out of this one. I think I'll get into this, what is traditionally the pile of chicken manure, which has not been particularly replenished in recent times because, well, basically we've not had too many hens in the latter days, so this stuff underneath is pretty good, and that'll be the last load into the second one of those beds that I've just cleared. That'll be 2 beds ready for next season. Right, get this polished off. Well, that was quite a lot of physical effort, but it was worth it. 2 beds ready for next season, and the celeriac out and, well, sorted anyway. So I won't have to do anything with these 2 beds now, and the weed growth through the winter and early spring will be minimal, because that's the way it is with this compost, and those that you do get are very easy to pull out. What I did notice, one of the downsides of having the compost down under the shade of that sycamore tree is that there's a lot of sycamore seed in the compost. So I can see next season I'm going to be pulling sycamore out quite a lot, but it's a very easy seedling to remove. It comes out very easily indeed, and once it's out there's no regrowth. So I'll work with that. But yeah, that's a good job jobbed. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and if you did, why not like and subscribe? And if you want to get my updates every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 p.m, choose whether you're going to grow celeriac or not next year. I think I'm going to grow a few, but just differently. Good times.